I wanted to ask David Samson about this because Chris Mannix has talked to a series of NBA executives. This story is going to continue to grow. I know football is going to continue to overwhelm all in its path, but one Eastern Conference executive says, quote, "This is a huge deal." A Western Conference general manager says, "Bad for them, very bad. The NBA will be pissed about this. If it's true, the punishment will be worse than what happened in Minnesota with Joe Smith." NBA officials are furious about these allegations, according to a source with the league office telling SI, if this is what it looks like, I think Adam has to make an example of them. I don't think this is going to be a small deal, but Mark Cuban, as is his wont, in protection of these people that he cares about, the owners, and a sport he cares about, because I imagine Mark Cuban right now is sort of frustrated. All the money in the world, I understand, but he loved that thing in a way he didn't love anything else. It was his identity, and he can be Shark Tank and everything else, but they trade Luka, and he doesn't have any control over that. Like, whatever his dreams were to own the toy that was the Dallas Mavericks, he exceeded them, but now he's old, and basketball hasn't left him behind, but the Dallas Mavericks and his identity make it so that he's the first one out on behalf of the owners to question 7 months of investigation by Pablo Torre, and begins with, if you'd taken the time. These rich people are burying media because they've got all the money in the world, and Pablo took 7 months of time to establish what Mark Cuban says he couldn't establish, that Ballmer didn't know. David Samson, you're an expert in this field. How could Ballmer possibly not know that $28 million was going to circumvent the cap so that they could get Kawhi Leonard?
Allegedly.
So a couple of things. When we were sitting in that room with Pablo, Amin, El Hassan, and myself, when we did the show, Pablo didn't tell us what the show was, didn't tell us what was going on. There were documents, and all of a sudden, live, we are looking at these documents, and it's all there. And Mark Cuban may or may not have watched the episode. Certainly, judging by his tweet, he had not. He had only watched the 4-minute clip on Twitter along with the other 25 million people. But Steve Ballmer gave money, invested money in this company, Aspiration. It's right there. It is a publicly filed document right there. And then the company did a deal with Kawhi Leonard for $28 million. Can you imagine Kawhi Leonard getting $28 million to endorse anything, but a company that already was giving money to Leonardo DiCaprio and Drake and Orlando Bloom and Cindy Crawford and Kaya Gerber, on and on and on. Robert Downey Jr., for crying out loud, did a commercial, and all of them made a tiny percentage of Kawhi Leonard. Do you think that the heads of Aspiration said, hey, we've got an investor in our company who owns the Clippers. Should we ask him whether Kawhi Leonard would be a good pitch person to plant a frickin' tree? Nah, let's not bother asking him. Give me a break. Of course Steve Ballmer knew. It's absurd to think that he would not have known. We had players who did deals with sponsors of our team for like a few shekels, like the corner grocery store in Hialeah or a car dealer local. Yeah, you get 25 grand in a car, big whoop,
yeah,
don't care.
But you don't have a salary cap. You don't have a salary cap, though.
But I'm saying that even we would know about the little stuff. If one of our players were doing a $28 million deal with a company that we had an investment in, David, it belies all credibility.
All right, so David, help me with this part, which is within your expertise, which is why you're a part of the episode with Pablo Torre. These things have to be heavily lawyered. You have to be able to prove these things. The money will bury you, and it is dangerous to do what Pablo is doing because the money does not like when this is done to them. Steve Ballmer is the 6th richest man in the world, wants to win with a laughingstock franchise, and according to what seems to be proof, what looks like proof, allegedly, he's got a deal that has a whole bunch of fraud in it, and while Kawhi Leonard did have a New Balance deal, you can tell me what he's actually gotten in endorsements, $28 million, and to be so sloppy about it, that he doesn't even send out a tweet of him planting a tree or have somebody go out and just hashtag aspiration, just a social media account, pay 10 tweets, something that suggests you're earning that money. Take us through, David, as quickly as you can with as much expertise as you can, what Mark Cuban did yesterday, because he doesn't have facts if he thinks Pablo Torre doesn't have this story pinned down.
Well, he got as confused as you got, so I just want to be clear that this story is not about Steve Ballmer committing or being accused of any fraud. The fraud was committed by the people who started Aspiration, and one of the co-founders was pled guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud and bilking investors out of money. That's not what we're talking about with Steve Ballmer. The simple conversation around Steve Ballmer revolves around salary cap circumvention, not a crime. A violation of the NBA rules, but not a crime. So make sure you're very clear about that. Number 2.
Thank you. I appreciate the correction.
No, I can't tell if you're being sarcastic or not, but I love you anyway.
No,
but it's a big difference.
No, but David, this stuff is dangerous. When you bring this stuff to power, the 6th richest man in the world knows how to extinguish this, unless the other owners tell Adam Silver, hey, you can't do that. But if they're all doing it, and if they send Mark Cuban out to protect that they're all doing some form of that, do you know how hard these things are to prove? Nobody's going to be able to prove anything ever on Steve Ballmer. But it doesn't.
There's an investigation, Dan. The NBA said we have to investigate this. We have to figure out what happened because this doesn't smell right. What doesn't smell right is a $28 million deal, which we have a copy of. Pablo got a copy of the actual endorsement contract that I went through page by page on the show. And there are provisions in that contract that don't pass the smell test under any scenario. And most with Kawhi Leonard getting $28 million from that company. But what the NBA has to figure out is, does Steve Ballmer get made an example of, or do they bury Kevin McHale the way they did when Glenn Taylor got suspended, but Kevin McHale got in the real trouble, $3.5 million fine, big whoop. Joe Smith contract terminated, big whoop. This is a far bigger deal. There's way more money at stake, and Steve Ballmer is way more powerful. In terms of Mark Cuban, he is an ancillary part of this story because he got involved on Twitter with Pablo, where he was saying, Pablo, how could you not have investigated the scammers? Why are you not focusing on the fact that Ballmer got scammed? Well, Mark, that was the first 30 minutes of the episode. It was all about these Democratic
and shouldn't have been
people.
Because you guys spent 15 minutes not getting to the point. Like they spent 15 minutes before they told us what they were talking about because they were talking about that stuff.
But even if it wasn't, who gives why is it Pablo's responsibility to check into Steve Ballmer getting scammed? Pablo's coming at it from a sports perspective, which is the NBA side of it. Who cares about Ballmer getting scammed?
And that's where Mark Cuban got confused. And he talked about the fact that if you have to investigate the scammers. Scammers can get scammed, and just like scammers can scam. But that's not the point of the episode at all. And Pablo was very clear about the difference that you just conflated. And I understand why, because it's complicated. But the fraud is what Aspiration did to investors. Ballmer was an investor, but Ballmer put money in that then went out the door. Why was money going out the door to Kawhi Leonard when other bills weren't being paid? Why was Kawhi Leonard getting $7 million a year to do nothing? Why is it a coincidence around the signing of Kawhi Leonard? There's got to be something here. NBA, go investigate. And so they are going to investigate. What Mark Cuban said is, I'm totally irrelevant. I'm not a governor or alternate governor. I have nothing to do with the Mavericks. So therefore, let me go and say that I'm Team Ballmer. That's how he started. I got 20 minutes of nothing personal this morning because he said I'm Team Ballmer. It's totally absurd, second only to the Clippers statement where they said we had no oversight over the contract with Kawhi Leonard and Aspiration. Of course you didn't, because you're not on the contract, but that's not the issue. Did you have influence over it, Steve? That's what Adam Silver's going to ask.
For perspective, his deal with New Balance, Kawhi Leonard, was multi-years, $5 million a year. So there's a chance that he was being paid more by Aspiration than he was by New Balance.
Think about that for a second. When you lose sight of the dollars, think about what Tony just said for a second. New Balance, which forced Kawhi to do commercials he did not want to do, paid him $5 million a year. This no-show job paid him $7 million a year. Think about that one for a second.
What offended me about the Cuban tweet is that it said it's sad that Pablo Torre didn't take the time to find out how these scammers pulled off their scam. Well, A, it's in the episode, and B, Pablo took 7 months of painstaking investigative journalism, and I don't want to downplay that. This was not a story when there were lawyers, Dan, while it was being recorded to make sure that everything was very clear what I was looking at and what then I would say in response to what I was looking at. And so this is a serious show that Pablo did, and Mark just saying, oh, you seems like you shot it out of the, side of your pants. I did not appreciate that.
When he says at the end there that it's going to come back to backfire on Pablo, is it like a threat? What does that mean?
It sounds like someone trying to stay relevant who knows that he has no more seat at the table. The question is, did Steve Ballmer call Mark and say, man, and we got to do a statement. We got a real problem. Mark, what do I do? I'll bet you $1 that call did not take place.
Mark Cuban is pretty relevant, David.